So the web shell is one of the most common techniques that are used by attackers to gain the initial foothold on the target system, meaning make their way in, right? Get their foot in the door, so to speak. So what they are known for is the fact that they actually give the attacker remote access, which then enables the attacker to do a lot of different things later on. And these were all part of the attack chain. So the first step of the attack chain is really to do reconnaissance and gather intelligence. But then the very next thing that you want to do, the next major step you want to take, is to actually get into the system. So all the recon that you do, all the vulnerability scans that you do, enumeration, everything that you end up doing leads to you gaining access. And if you can gain remote access, that means you can do it from a different country. And then once you're in the system or inside of the network, you can then proceed to do the other things that you wanted to do further along in the attack chain. So this is a very important piece for the attacker. Everything for them up until this point has been intelligence gathering and doing different tactics or attempts of exploitation so that they can finally get their foot in the door. And web shells are one of these things that if the web shell is actually successful, if they have a shell, that means they're already in the system and now they can do a variety of different things. So our job is to detect this. Ideally, we would want to detect it before this even takes place. But if there is a web shell, we definitely need to detect it. So we need to first understand these things, review the understanding of these things, and then go into the detection techniques that we'll be using to detect those types of attacks against us. And it would be either through a variety of different logs or the different tools that we can use. The objectives are to understand what web shells are and how attackers use them, detecting the web shell activity through a log, through the file system and network analysis, and understanding common tools in web shell detection. The prerequisites for this would be the web application basics, and we've already done videos on this, so this exists. You can just search through the channel content. You could literally search for web application basics and you'll be able to find it. Then there's the introduction to log analysis, which I believe we actually did at the beginning of the SOC Level 1 playlist that you're watching right now. And then we have MITRE, which I've done so many different videos on the MITRE attack framework and the attack matrix. So you can find a bunch of stuff on MITRE by just doing a search on the channel for MITRE. So these are our prerequisites, and I mean, I will explain them, and obviously we're going to use them as we go through this video, but it's highly recommended that you do have a good enough understanding of it so that the stuff that I explain, hopefully it all connects to you and you can actually link it together. So that is pretty much it. That's what we got for the prerequisites and the introduction. So let's talk about the overview of the web shells. Okay, to understand what a web shell is, we need to first understand what a shell is. So when you establish a shell, it's basically a terminal connection. So if we were to look at a shell terminal kind of a view, if you just wanted to look at it, this is basically what it looks like. This is a shell, right? So this is a shell. When you see this, you are inside of a shell. We also call this a terminal. And so being in this environment, you are now interacting with the operating system via the command line. A web shell doesn't look like this. It would be done through the web itself. It's through the web application. Usually it's through a web browser, but there are ways that you can use the web browser to get a reverse connection, a remote connection through something like a netcat listener. So you would have your terminal on your attack box like this, right? Your terminal would be running netcat as a listener, and then you would execute the web shell payload on the remote web server. And from there, assuming that that's done correctly and it actually is successful, once that web shell actually executes on your terminal, you'll see that connection has been established and you can run through your terminal and you're technically interacting with the web shell that's running on that web server. But a lot of times you would literally be doing the interaction through the web browser instead of doing it through your shell, through your internal terminal. So it's a malicious program uploaded to a target web server, enabling adversaries to execute commands remotely. Web shells often serve as both an initial access method via a file upload vulnerability and a persistence mechanism, meaning you get to stay in the network and you get to stay in the system. Once access has been gained on a compromised server, attackers can use a web shell to move through the kill chain, performing reconnaissance, escalating privileges, moving laterally, exfiltrating data, maybe encrypting data. There are so many things that you can do, really creating users so that you can further upload rootkits into it. So many things that you could do. Below is a simple example of the web shell named awebshell.php. So this is a file, right, that was uploaded and it was actually received properly by the web server, meaning the web server allowed the file upload to take place, and then the user was then able to access the file. So when you see this, note that the web shell is located in the uploads directory, because this is typically what it's like when you actually load something. So the domain, right, or the IP address is where they're visiting. There's the uploads directory, which all of the files that have been uploaded to this IP address would exist. So they're going to the IP address /uploads/ awebshell.php. This is inside of their browser, right? And then now they're inside of the browser, and now they can see, look, there's a little command line right here where they did ls-la, and then they click run, and then now it's actually displaying the contents of the specific directory that they're in, which is the uploads directory, and it's displaying the content. So this is literally no different than you running it in your own file system on your terminal. If you were to run ls-la in your own terminal, it would display the contents of whatever folder that you're in. And a web server is basically a file system that exists on a server somewhere that you can access through the internet. That's all it is. So the same thing, and you know what's interesting is that the command line syntax that they're using in this case is the command line syntax of a Linux machine or a Unix machine. So Mac OS also accepts ls-la, and technically PowerShell on a Windows computer will also accept ls-la. But if you weren't using PowerShell and you were using the command prompt, the cmd exe command prompt inside of a Windows computer, ls wouldn't work. You would have to use dir for dir, and then that would actually list the contents of the directory that you're in. But it's basically a file system. So the root of this file system is this IP address that you see here. /uploads is a folder, and then / whatever is now the contents inside of that folder. And so in this case, the web shell PHP is a file that is inside of the uploads folder. We are referencing this file by putting its full path inside of our browser. It is displaying it for us, and now we can interact with this PHP file via our browser, which means that we can actually submit commands into it, and it can actually run those commands. So we can see that there's our file, the web shell file. There's customer info, ooh, sensitive, couple of pictures, Q1 financials, Q2 financials, and web development notes. Some pretty sensitive files are inside of this location, right? So this is basically when you successfully can run a web shell inside of a browser on a web server somewhere in, it could be in a completely different country, right? So the deployment of this, for us to be able to upload and execute a web shell, the file upload vulnerability, misconfiguration, or prior access to the system is required. A lot of times we're relying on the file upload vulnerability if we don't have access to the system, right? Or we're relying on some kind of a misconfiguration that will lead to that file upload vulnerability, or the misconfiguration is giving us access to the uploads folder. That could be the thing, right? So it's kind of like a combination of the two, where there's the file upload vulnerability that allows us to upload a PHP script into their system, and then the other side is that it's misconfigured in the sense that we actually have access to that uploads folder. So now we can upload a malicious file as well as access where it's stored and run that file. prior access to the system is assuming that you're already in the system. So we're gonna try to assume that we don't have access to the system, and we want to rely mostly on these types of vulnerabilities or misconfigurations. These arise when an application fails to validate the file type, for example, .php. We shouldn't be able to upload .php into a server because it's a script that we're uploading, basically. The extension, again, .php. Content, it should read the contents of the file that's being uploaded and say, this is a script that this guy is trying to upload here, or the destination, which is the uploads folder, right? While web shells are used in an initial access vector, they can also serve as a persistence mechanism if the attacker has already compromised the system and wants to maintain long-term access. Imagine a simple website that allows you to upload your pet photos, and it's intended for storing images. However, if developed insecurely, an attacker may upload a web shell like shell.php or mydog.aspx and gain command execution on the server. Again, this is the extension, right? So when they're saying the file extension or the file type itself, so if the file type is a script or the extension is some funky extension that is not a JPEG image or a PNG image, it's like, why are you even able to upload this, right? You should automatically block me from uploading this. So the example would be something like this. So this actually has happened, right? So Hafnium and Proxy Logon. Hafnium is a Chinese-based advanced persistent threat group, APT group, and they uploaded .aspx web shells to Windows Exchange servers in directories such as the www.root ASP.NET client directory. So you can see the inet public www.root ASP.NET client. And they have also been seen modifying existing files in directories such as install path, front end, proxy, OWA authorization or authentication. So these are directories, as the backslashes imply. These are directories that are inside of Windows computers, and they have successfully been able to upload these kinds of files with these extensions, but they are web shells. They execute commands when you upload them and you run them. So once the web shell is successfully deployed, Hafnium continues to execute commands, perform reconnaissance, dump credentials, further establish persistence through new user accounts, move laterally, exfiltrate data, and cover their tracks to evade detection. The Conti ransomware attackers, another one, there are threat actors that abused a similar vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange, which allowed them to upload an ASP.NET, ASP.NET client log whatever .aspx, right, to the same ASP client directory as Hafnium, right? So the same directory that they used previously, or the directory that Hafnium used, they were able to upload it over there. Within minutes of the initial web shell upload, they uploaded a backup web shell and mapped out the network's computers, domain controllers, and domain administrators. That is insane. And of course, this was ransomware. So as you can imagine, the end goal for these guys was to encrypt everything on those servers, on those Microsoft Exchange locations, and then ask for ransom. So really, really powerful stuff. You can do really crazy things if you're able to successfully launch a web shell. So which MITRE ATT&CK persistence sub-technique are web shells associated with? So we actually have to go and look it up. I think there was a clickable button for us to be able to access MITRE. Okay, so we don't have it. So we need to go ahead and find the persistence sub-technique that is associated with web shells on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to MITRE ATT&CK, and we can see that right here. So the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, it's the very first link that usually shows up. So enterprise matrix is what we can see here. It falls under persistence. Oh, this is interesting. So let's go to the homepage, does it? Oh, okay. This is what the homepage usually looks like. And so it falls under persistence, which is right here. And so we're looking for techniques, and then inside of techniques, we have sub-techniques that you can see right here. So specifically, we're looking for web shells. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to do show sub-techniques, so it expands everything. And then I'm going to do Command F, and then I'm going to do web shell. So web shell, this one is under the persistence. Oh, interesting. So web shells is under persistence. Oh, it is. That's what we're trying to do, actually. reconnaissance persistence. There we go. Okay, so it's under persistence. So if we go down here, where was it? It's right here. So web shell is T15. So if you hover over it, it says T1505.003. So let's see if that, I think that's what they're asking for. So 1505.003. And there it is. Okay, what file extension is commonly used for web shells targeting Microsoft? And that was the .aspx. Very cool. All right, so now we got that. So the next piece is to get the anatomy of a web shell.